Well, thank you to this Herald Tribune Hot Topics Forum on the Bay. It is, I think, it's our 20th Hot Topics Forum, give or take one. So if you've been here before, thank you very much. First, I want to thank our host, the Sarasota Orchestra. They put a lot of investment into this event, so give them a round of applause, please. Our friends from At Large are live streaming this on Facebook Live. So if you know what Facebook Live is, it's pretty impressive. And so, hey, Facebook Live people, you'll be able to submit questions through Facebook Live for the question and answer part. I think you all have, excuse me, cards for questions. If you'd like to submit a question, write it, and somebody will be collecting them. I think Jill will be collecting them and getting them up, excuse me, I'm sorry, getting them up to me. If your question is not answered, the folks at the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization have promised to answer them via email, right? Or online. So should they put their email on there?
You can, but we're planning to answer all the questions and post it on our website.
Okay, so all of them will get answered, I am promised. So I want to thank my Herald Tribune colleagues who helped arrange this, and some of whom were sitting out in the rather warm afternoon sun, so thank you to them. I want to recognize our executive editor, Matt Sauer. Matt. I like to say that Matt is in charge of everything but the opinion pages, so if you don't like the crossword or the comics, he's your guy. So, what we're going to do is start off with a presentation by the folks from Sasaki. It will be pretty much what folks got to see today at the open houses, unless I'm wrong. And we thought we'd lay the foundation there. Then we will have Gina Ford, who's the team leader of Sasaki, and A.G. Lafley, who's the chairman of the Sarasota Bay Planning Organization, and city manager Tom Barwin, when he shows up. So, let me introduce Gina Ford, team leader for Sasaki.
Thank you all so much for coming. We're so thrilled to be here and so honored to be working on this extraordinary project for your community, on this extraordinary property in this extraordinary community, so thank you. I want to introduce, I'm the team leader for the Sasaki team, who was selected last fall to lead this master planning effort. Believe it or not, we're already halfway through. I'll show you that in a moment. But I wanted to introduce my incredible team, starting with the other half of my dynamic duo, Susanna Ross, the project manager. Please stand. Chris Wangro, our programming specialist, former circus performer. Bill Waddell, you want to say hello, our managing director from SBPO. Steve, why don't you just, Steve Cover from the city of Sarasota. You're part of the team. There you go. Martin Zogren, our lead urban designer from Sasaki. Christine Dunn, our lead architect from Sasaki. Zach Crisco, our lead engineer from Sasaki. Mike Herman, our extraordinary boat expert from Moffett and Nickel. Candace Damon from HRNA Advisors, our economist, who's joined by her colleague Alex Stokes, also from HRNA. And in the back of the room in the green sweater, who will be collecting questions, is our lead planner for the project, Jill Dixon. So thank you. Oh, where's Kathy Blaha? Hi, Kathy, and Kathy Blaha of Kathy Blaha Consulting, who's helping us with governance. So that's a lot of people. It's an extraordinarily rich site that takes a lot of different types of expertise to really understand and honor its extraordinary dimensions. And so, as you see, we have a group of experts that are really as diverse and as varied as your incredible site. Am I good? Should I go into the story? Okay, here we go. So here's your site. I think you all know we started at 43 acres. I think we're getting closer to 55 acres or something as Centennial Park and Boat Ramp were added in January to our kind of scope. So it grew, and we're really grateful that it did. So here's our extraordinary site. I'm getting heckled from the front row from my team. They tell me to sit. Okay. So this is our extraordinary site. As many of you know, there was a community-driven planning process about a year ago that the city ultimately adopted a set of guiding principles for the site. These are foundational to the work we're doing. We took this as our serious charge. So these guiding principles included a high aspiration that this was really going to be a world-class project, that we would think about it in terms of generations of Sarasotans, that we celebrate and express cultural heritage and natural heritage in terms of the Bayfront's natural assets, that it will be activated and connected, and lastly, that it'll always consider the highest level of sustainability, and we mean that both environmentally but also fiscally and financially. We have entered into this 9-month planning process. As you can see from the "We Are Here" at the bottom of this slide, we are more than halfway through our actual scope of work, which is hard to believe. Up until now, up until this moment, we've really been listening and putting forward questions to really elicit your vision for the physical strategy that would guide the future of this place. But this trip, we're here because we're showing ideas for the first time. So of course we expect some of those you're not going to like at all, and some of them you might like quite a bit. And so that's what we're really excited to hear. Our plan is to leave here this week and to come back in about a month's time, a little more than a month, to showcase what we consider to be the draft master plan. Kind of what are the ideas that are most resonant with the community? How do we put those into one framework strategy for the future of this site? And ultimately come back again in June with the final master plan that will go before City Commission in September for, hopefully, approval. It's our team's charge to get to yes, as we say. So to kick off the process, we've done an extraordinary amount of outreach. I hope we've touched all of you in one way or another, whether it's through social media, public forums that we've held, stakeholder meetings. We've done tours of the site. We even did Sarasota's first digital mayor's town hall, which had over 7,000 viewers on Facebook Live. And we have, by some estimates, reached about 30,000 people in this quick 4 months of outreach, which is extraordinary. We've had 600 engagement, plus you all tonight, just in the past 24 hours, so it's kind of extraordinary. From that, we've really listened to the feedback and synthesized it into a series of key takeaways. There's a lot of data here, and these were on the boards of the public open houses. But really what we take away from this is this idea that the Bay should be a unique place that combines art and ecology and culture and nature and recreation, that we should celebrate and improve the Bay and its ecological health, that food has really risen to the top of this community's desire for sort of amenities to be offered.
Don't forget the glass of wine at sunset.
You're not alone. So food is an important part of the 21st century park experience.
No, really, don't forget the glass of wine at sunset.
and wine. And then lastly, a focus on safe access. We've heard a lot about barriers to accessing the site and the waterfront. So after hearing all of this, it's our charge to bring forward ideas. We're not married to any of these ideas. These are ways of showing you alternative futures and hearing what resonates and what doesn't. So we're not asking people, and we haven't over the last 2 days, to vote on these options. We've asked people to tell us what they like and don't like in each of them. The idea being that we'll get to some synthesized scheme that really takes the best of all of these. So I'm going to walk through these very briefly, starting with what we called Shift the Horizon. So in Shift the Horizon, we imagine a kind of single, unifying, centralized gesture on the site, one that starts with what we're calling a land bridge. Imagine that the park actually grows out over 41 and connects to the opposite side of the road. The road actually dives down as an underpass under that land bridge so that pedestrians have a seamless, no-car connection between the Rosemary District and the park. And that land bridge is really centered on the historic municipal auditorium. Adjacent to that is a new performing arts facility. In all three of our schemes, we're accommodating the future Van Wezel program that they see as really helping them to be competitive and successful in the future, as well as the orchestra, have both provided us with their kind of dream scenario about what they'd like to see for future facilities. In this scheme, both of those are accommodated in one centralized sort of facility, potentially two separate buildings with a shared kind of lobby or access space. And that land bridge leads to that facility, leads to a waterfront amphitheater that steps right down to the bayfront with piers kind of quite literally reaching out to the bay. One on the north aligning with the summer sunset, one on the south aligning with the summer sunset, and then all the days in between as part of that amphitheater experience. This single gesture is surrounded by ecologically rich mangroves and waterfront paths and gardens that can really express this natural heritage of the bay. Parking is located on either side of that facility, low kind of 2 stories of parking in the center of the property, more like 4 stories on the south. And then this whole kind of district along 41 today is enhanced and expanded with those food and beverage options you all want so bad. And then to the north, an improvement to the existing boat ramp, which today is a very high functioning place, but we could imagine adding new kinds of amenities like a place to buy bait and ice to really enhance boater experience, and some piers that enable new kinds of boating facilities as well. So I'm going to take you out to the northwest and looking back towards downtown. So here you see Marina Jack and the downtown extent in the distance. Here's 41. And then this is our site looking in kind of a 3D oblique view. So you see again that kind of single gesture of this land bridge becoming amphitheater and pier, this cultural hub at the center of the site, and then all of this kind of rich waterfront edge, which we can imagine occupying and being quite lovely. We also brought forward some precedents of other communities, places, just so you can see these ideas being realized elsewhere. So the use of topography and shade structures, the use of native plants to really make extraordinary nature adventure, architecture that really celebrates this connection to the outside, waterfront spaces that embrace view and really connect people to the sunset and to the bay that are so special here. And then lastly, kind of human-scaled experiences where there's these indoor-outdoor spaces that are wonderful microclimates and great for human experience. That was one. Okay. Option 2 we called Bridge the Divide. In this scheme, we were thinking about all of the different ways we could make connections between parts of the site that are fragmented today, connections between the site and downtown and the Rosemary District, and even connections between things like indoor program and outside space. How do we start to break down barriers between engagement? And so you might notice, your eye might go here first, which is this notion that the new performing arts facility could actually be a bridge itself, kind of bridging over the existing inlet, boat ramp inlet here. We imagine that building to be kind of a billboard from the bay, something we could actually project and make sound, make music come out of, so you could be out on a boat looking back at this extraordinary kind of screen. Built around that is a series of restaurants and walkways that really create kind of a canal district of eating, dining experiences, cultural experience. And that kind of meets up with a upper level event space and public park that has the potential to be a great outdoor performance venue that could be used in conjunction with the building or on its own. Beneath this space, there's 2 decks of parking, 2 layers of parking that are below grade and covered with a green roof, basically, so hardly visible from the outside, but providing all of that parking that we need. A continuous waterfront drive and waterfront walks, again, take you through ecologically rich gardens and through the mangroves. And yeah, this is this scheme here. I'm going to take you again back up to the northwest, looking back at the site. So you get a sense of this new performing arts facility as both a piece of architecture and also a piece of infrastructure, one that connects across, connecting Centennial Park and a reconfigured boat ramp back to the site, something that becomes iconic both from the community but also from the bayfront. And you see this kind of, all of these different kinds of open spaces, passive and active, that line the waterfront. 3, it's important and a little hard to see, but 3 pedestrian overpasses are proposed in this scheme. 1 at Boulevard of the Arts, 1 at 10th, and then one connecting Centennial Park to Pioneer Park. The idea here being smaller but multiple connections over the road so the pedestrians go up and over. Again, some precedents, this like one-on-one engagement with the water system, some architecture, as you see here, that really starts to blur inside, outside, and make connections, places to occupy. Bridges as both beautiful elements in the landscape, but also places to be. You see this idea of kind of kids jumping off the bridge. And human experiences, again, this is the Miami Symphony where they broadcast what's happening inside the building to the park outside. So this idea that we start to sort of bridge that divide. But you guys could be the first ones ever to actually have that happen out on water. And then our final scheme, this is called the Village and the Island. This scheme started with the notion of an extraordinarily shaded, human, walkable, lovely village district, about the same scale as the kind of cultural arts facilities here that we're preserving in every scheme, but enhancing and growing that kind of scale of space through food and beverage offerings, courtyards, shaded spaces, a really kind of intensely walkable and beautiful place, bound together by a centralized main street, as you see here, that runs the whole extent of the site, linking a new cultural arts facility to the north and another one to the south. These become kind of anchors to this new main street. And each of those then have a parking supply, a parking structure to the north and potentially up to 2 parking structures to the south. So that's the kind of village, this intensely shaded, walkable district with food and cultural offerings, and a series of bridges from there that launch you out to an island oasis, a completely car-free pedestrian public park where we imagine extraordinary outdoor performances happening, maybe destination play for the region's children, beaches to really launch into this new water trail we've created, really celebrating human-powered craft as an important part. So paddle boards, kayaks could really launch here and sort of spend time exploring this new water trail through the site. There's an idea here. This is the site of the existing Van Wezel facility, and you see here what we're calling the Van Wezel Trace. The idea of using the form of the Van Wezel building into something that becomes a more of an outdoor 21st century flood-resilient performance venue, outdoors, and really offering a kind of 5,000-person event space. Here's looking back. So you see the island in the foreground, a continuous waterfront walk, the 2 performance venues, arts facilities in pink, and then this kind of walkable set of courtyards and small buildings and food offerings that really line this front edge along Main Street. We imagine this could be an extraordinary place to touch the water, swimming holes, beaches where you could launch off to a day of adventure, and again, this interior water trail is really useful for the small boats, and then we still have accommodation of the recreational boats here and the larger boats. So some of these ideas, closer kind of connection to nature, botanic gardens, shaded exploration. Here's something like that Van Wezel Trace idea, the idea of adapting a building that's prone for flooding into something that's more 21st century and still allows for performance to happen within it. Shaded spaces, engagement with water in all the different ways we can imagine, like the potential swimming hole. And again, really small scale, wonderful human spaces. So those were our 3 options. We presented those as part of boards at an open house. We've been presenting them in forums like this. We've provided, in all cases, a kind of comparative analysis showing what are the different elements of each scheme. I know you can't read this, but it's online if you want to download and look carefully. But this gives you kind of just the metrics of how you think about how much is soft edge of the site, what's the kind of maintenance requirements, how many parking spaces are offered, all of the kinds of pieces of data that people have asked us. But at the same time that we've done these really lovely, we hope you think they're lovely, images of the potential futures, we've also been digging deeply into some really sticky technical issues. So parking and transportation, I'm just showing you kind of one diagram of many that we showed to the community today and yesterday. We've been looking deeply with our experts from Kimley Horn and with my partner, Martin Zogren, urban designer, looking very deeply at parking demand in the future, multimodal access to the site, and how we can think about a more sustainable future where parking is accommodated and transportation issues are minimized to the extent we can. And so each of the schemes puts forward about 1,800 cars on site, which is about 400 more than exist today. We think that's a reasonable amount to accommodate the peak demand assuming that in the future we build in lots of amenities that allow people to come to the site in lots of different ways, by boat, by bike, by pedestrian walkways, better connectivity to downtown, all of the ways, Uber drop-offs, and kind of making it really convenient for people to explore new ways of getting to the site, in addition to good, convenient parking as we can. We also have given a lot of thought, my partner Zach Crisco, thinking about sea level rise and resilience. So we know that our site is prone to flooding during coastal storm surge events. It's relatively safe from just your average sea level rise. We have a little bit of advantage of topography, but when categories 2 and 3 storms come through, you start to see these impacts. And so everything we build on the site, everything we're recommending for the future will have to meet FEMA standards of being much higher in finished floor than they are today, including the building that we're in today actually is much lower. So we're thinking where buildings today sit roughly some of the most vulnerable at elevation 5. The future really looks more like elevation 18, so 10 to 15 feet higher than how they sit today on site. That's really important because these events are frequent, as you know, and will cause damage. We've also done an extraordinary cultural needs assessment. Chris Wangro and Christine have done an extraordinary job trying to meet with every cultural organization in town to understand needs and desires, who wants to find home on this site, what do they think about this project, including intensive engagement with both the Van Wezel and the orchestra. And what picture is being painted for us is one where we think about 21st century arts and cultures in a more inclusive way than I think we've thought about it in the past. So how can we start to think about the offerings on this site as a way of incubating even new arts and cultural experiences? So there's lots of small theater troupes in town, lots of visual arts being practiced in town. How can we allow some of those to happen on site and really make the site more inclusive and more representative of the broader community? We did a pretty intensive survey, Mike Herman from Moffett and Nickel, of the existing boat ramp to understand the users. And so we just got this data back last week after looking and interviewing over 640 users over the course of 3 weeks. Not peak time, we understand, but we can start to extrapolate that data. Thank you so much. And so we can start to understand how well that boat ramp is used, how well loved it is, and what are the ways that it's inefficient, like its parking lot there's some improvement we could make there to make that even more efficient. And some of the really interesting findings, we know that it's often used for commercial use. We know that it's used, as you would expect, far more often on the weekends than during the day. And again, there's both really well-designed parts of it, but also some places of inefficiency we can think about sort of capturing back some open space. And lastly, our teammates from HRNA have been looking at both the capital sources, how do we think about investment in this site and the kinds of costs that this kind of planning will enable, but also the long-term operation and maintenance, and starting to look at funding sources that are available both at the local, state, county, federal level, as well as ways of capturing value of development already planned or on the sort of docks for this project. And then thinking also about what extent of the site will be developed at a high level that will have higher operations and maintenance costs. We've asked the community, again, not to vote, but just to tell us what things they like, what are they concerned about, what they don't like. We're going to have a Herculean task of figuring this out over the next month. And so I'm hoping we'll get a good night's sleep maybe tonight and tomorrow night. And then it's going to be pencils up and thinking about it. So the scorecards were given out at all of our public forums. They're also available on the baysarasota.org website, so you can go there and do exactly the same survey that people did manually over the last couple of days. And with that, here we're back at our 3 schemes, and I think we're going to invite the team up for a conversation. So thank you.
Good, thank you. So to my far left is A.G. Lafley, chairman of the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization. And this fellow you may recognize when he's not taking down people who are stealing from a church. He's, which he really did, actually. City Manager Tom Barwin.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You're all my bosses, but are my immediate bosses here? Any of my immediate bosses here? Any city commissioners or anyone like that? Okay, they probably couldn't get a ticket. This was a
That's
hot
right.
ticket. Oh my goodness.
So you can talk freely, Tom.
No reporters
Yeah,
here, right?
no reporters, no recordings. This won't be found anywhere. Let's start with and I'm just going to do first names with first and middle name initials with AG. AG, just to give us the primer on what is the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization, for those who may not be familiar.
Okay. We are 8 volunteer citizens, and Tom Barwin, who makes 9.
I get paid.
And you're the only one that gets paid.
Yes, yes.
And we have been, we filed as a not-for-profit, 501c3, when we formed up in November and December. And I guess kind of a sentence or two of background. Recall this whole initiative was started by the Bayfront 2020 Coalition, right? And for a couple of years, they engaged with the community. The 30,000 number that Gina mentioned includes 7,000 to 8,000 that were engaged by Bayfront 2020 in the first couple of years. And then the engagement since, it includes live meetings, so physically present engagements. It includes Facebook followers, active followers, real followers. And it includes individuals who are on active email lists or have filled out our surveys. But 30,000 is, we feel pretty good about that. So we are a planning facilitation board. And we serve at the pleasure of the city commission and the city management. You have to remember this 53 acres is owned by the city. All the leases are managed by the city. Many of the important decisions will ultimately be made by the city. And our responsibilities are to recruit the talent that the community needs and the city needs to design a master plan to transform the site for 30, 40, 50, and more years into the future. As you may know, we went through a very competitive process. Some 20 to 25 nationally recognized and internationally recognized design and urban planning firms competed for this project. At the Robert L. Taylor Center, the 4 finalists competed in a Final Four. More than 200 of you joined us for those 2 days. And we ended up selecting Sasaki, whom you met again tonight. We also needed professional management, and we recruited Bill and Sue and Lori. Bill has 30-plus years at Kimley Horn here in town. Sue has decades of experience in management, and Lori has just been a terrific addition to our team. And our job is to make sure that we stay connected to the community on a continuous basis so that we understand your needs, your wants, your desires, and your aspirations. It's one thing to understand the overall aspiration. It's one thing to understand the 6 guiding principles that Bayfront 2020 and the community came together on, that the city endorsed and said, yeah, let's go ahead and start with those as a basis. But we need to, we get into the neighborhoods. We'll meet with any group in town. We've met stakeholders, and we're pretty much have our ear to their ground, our eyes open, and we're trying to understand what you want, and then help Sasaki and Bill translate it into a design and a plan. And the last thing I want to say, because this is really important, fortunately the city hired a planning director. It was a vacant position since the recession, I believe. Is that right, Tom?
Right.
Yeah. And Stephen Cover has been a great addition to our team. So he's served on several of our committees, and he and his team work side by side with Bill and side by side with Sasaki. So that's a little bit long-winded, Tom, but we are a planning facilitation board, citizen volunteers working on behalf of the community in the city.
Great. Have you been funded, and by how much?
Good question. We are all privately funded. Every penny we've raised $2 to $2.5 million. About a third of it came from the 5 major foundations in town. It was, I think the Patterson Foundation stepped up very publicly in the beginning with a challenge grant and said, if you put together kind of a proper planning board and go through a proper process and the community's involved from the beginning, we're going to encourage this kind of an effort. And the other foundations stepped up, and then the other 2/3 has been raised from private individuals.
Okay, great. So Gina and AG, and I'll get to you soon.
It's okay.
Don't worry.
See a lot of questions being
Tell us a little bit about kind of the assumptions and facts that were used to come up with these concepts. In other words, okay, so I think everybody knows you had this planning process with people talked about what we would really like, wine at sunset, and those things, open space, right? But what are some of the more, hardcore facts and assumptions that you used, and either one of you can answer or both, that you used to come up with these concepts?
Oh, let's double team them.
Sure.
And I'll take head on a couple of the more controversial ones that came up in conversation today and have been discussed in public over the last couple of weeks. You have to remember that these are concept designs, that they envision possibilities out 5, 10, 15, 20, in many cases 50 years or more. And they reflect the recommendations of the incumbents. So I'll hit 3 very specific examples. The Van Wezel management, Mary Benzel and team, foundation board, and their professional advisors and consultants have been recommending for some time to the community and to the city that the community and the city are going to have to seriously consider a new performing arts center for the next 50 to 75 years or more. There were public commission meetings on the subject. There were 1 or 2, all our meetings are noticed, public presentations to our board and committees. Mary has been out in town talking to various organizations. I think it's been pretty clear that that's been the recommendation. So since we have a future-based concept and design, Sasaki reflected the recommendation that down the road at some time in the future there would be a new performing arts center. We did exactly the same thing working closely with the orchestra. They have been embarked on an initiative to look at if and when there should be a new concert hall for orchestral music here in Sarasota. So you'll notice on all the plans that Gina described, there is a new orchestra hall and there's a new performing arts center. Sometimes they're adjacent, sometimes they're separate, but they reflect the future plans. Holly Hall is not on, where we are tonight is not on any of those future renderings. The current Van Wezel building is not on those future renderings. The Gee Whiz is not on those future renderings, and Tom can help me here, but there is no current lease to the best of my knowledge. There is no current function, and we haven't been asked by the city or any incumbent to include a future for that current building which sits on the site. The second thing I'll say, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gina because she knows all this way better than I do. You probably noticed that, and we have heard over and over again in just about every meeting we have with the community, the asset that we all start with here is Sarasota Bay. Okay, it's an incredible natural asset, and we hear time and again from all ages, from all groups, whatever you do, please protect the health and vitality of the bay, the shoreline, the bayfront. Please make it open and accessible to all of us, and please enliven it with a wider range of uses than we have today. And I think that's important. And you'll notice in every one of the renderings, when you look out 50 years or so, you have to seriously look at how do you keep the bay, the shoreline, and the bayfront ecologically and environmentally resilient, sound, and secure? And would it be responsible to build a major structure 50 years from now in a floodplain or in an area that could well be threatened by seawater or the kind of events that we have more than occasionally in places like Florida? So I just tell you that because that's some of the thinking that goes behind the conceptual design. Gina?
So I would add, we at Sasaki made a decision that we would come and compete for this project as Sasaki, as the lead design team. And if and when selected, which we were grateful to be, we would assemble the most extraordinary, most rigorous set of talented sub-consultants we could possibly find, some of which would be local and would really understand Sarasota and the community here, especially technically, and some of which would be national, people who had the best expertise in the country around this specific kind of park making. So I introduced you to the Sasaki team, which I think are just the most extraordinarily talented group of people I've ever worked with in my life. And in addition to the design team, we had what we called a technical team and an implementation team. The technical team includes Baird, national experts in waterfront resiliency and sea level rise and projections, Kimley Horn on transportation and parking, again, a long history here in Sarasota and national expertise, Moffitt and Nickel, evidenced by Mike Herman, to really help us understand, even when there wasn't data, we had to actually go do a boat user study so that we could understand actually how that boat ramp was being used. Am I missing anyone on the technical team, Miss Susanna? Come back to that. On the implementation team, we have HRNA advisors who are the nation's best, probably the world's best thinkers about economic sustainability and park systems. Kathy Blaha, who lives her life to figure out governance for projects just like this, and Chris Wangro, who's just the most creative person we know around programming and activation. So we have relied really heavily on their depth of expertise in thinking about some of the more challenging issues. I showed you a little cross-section of some of the technical details we showed to the community. There's so much more, I could bore you to tears, but I promise you we're doing everything we can to make sure we have the hard and true facts about things like parking, that we have the best information that's available about sea level rise, and that we understand the community as best we can through all of this feedback. So,
Okay. Good. AG?
Yeah, I just want to make, not to break my arm patting Gina on the back, but one of the reasons we selected Sasaki is they do waterfronts. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you go online and check out a number of projects that they've designed and implemented, they do waterfronts from the Gulf to rivers to lakefronts to ocean fronts, and that was really important because we have a very important waterfront here, right? And the second thing that they do is they do complex projects that involve integrating the independent but important needs of cultural and other recreational entities. The other thing that to answer Tom's question all the way, we've tried very hard to run an open, transparent, community engaged and disciplined process. And part of the discipline is separating choices and decisions, sequencing choices and decisions, and being really clear about whose choice and decision it is. So on the question, and we got a lot of questions today about, what are we going to do in this city, in this community with the existing Van Wezel building? The first question we need to sort through is, will we do a new performing arts center? What will it be? Where will it be? How will we do it? When will we do it? Once that's resolved and a decision is made, if a decision is made, and only if a decision is made to go ahead with a new performing arts center, then Mary and her team are going to have to manage a transition for some 3 to 5 years. And then we're going to have to address as a community and as a city, what are the options for this building that has served us, so well for 50 plus years. And they're very sensible processes, to do this kind of thing. But you have to take the decisions sort of one at a time in sequence and make sure that you keep them separate.
Okay. So I'll just give you a reminder, these mics are pretty sensitive, so if you'll just stay close.
Stay close.
Tom Barwin, city manager. Your general thoughts, and more specifically, what has the city asked for, and what does it want?
Well,
Other than something very easy that you can
Yeah.
sign off and be done with.
we're here at Holly Hall. This may be the first intermission of a major production. It's going to have a couple of intermissions in the course of the show. But the City Commission has been just open to the ideas that have emanated from the community. And this started with Michael Klaubar and Virginia Haley and the Bayfront 2020 people asking, what can we do to take this Bayfront to its next stage? Way back when before the Van Wezel was built, it was kind of a public works dump out here partially, and it had a big evolution 50 years ago, and this community is going through one of those inspiring periods that occurred here 40 or 50 years ago. We're doing major transportation planning, we're doing an updated zoning code, there's a Parks and Recreational Master Plan that's coming together, and this is in the center of all of it, the Bayfront Plan, because it really is the heartbeat. It's in the middle of the city. It's sort of the flagship to our cultural life here, which is one of the reasons people come here to live and they thrive while they're here. So the city has been open to just really the whole process that started with Bayfront 2020. They recruited and handed the ball off to the SBPO. And under the leadership of AG, it's been an amazing, amazing process. He is very humble. I have no problem understanding how you took P&G to be one of the world's greatest companies in the world, not once but twice. And in reading his book or something that was written about him, his mantra, I'm sure you're going to correct me if I mess this up, but it was find out what the customer wants and deliver the product. And this room tonight is reflective of, I think, AG's obsession with wanting to know what everybody else thinks before he starts to organize these strategic decision-making, points. And that's been an amazing process. The other amazing thing is for a government guy to watch how the private sector works. I'm glad we still have them, Tom, because the first or second meeting, they were getting schooled up on living with the sunshine laws in Florida. I thought they were all going to quit. I really did. But because business, they just get together and make decisions and move out. And we have a very aggressive time schedule here. But they have all learned to live and I think complied happily and disciplined themselves to live within the sunshine laws in here. So the city's expectations, I think, like their community's expectations, we expect an awesome, iconic product that is going to be at the heartbeat of this city for the next at least 50 years, maybe longer. And I believe we're going to get it from what I'm seeing so far.
All right. So let me just ask you this directly. Has the city decided whether it wants a new performing arts hall?
Here's what I know to, I think, reiterate the point. When the Van Wezel was built 50 years ago, it was only the second performing arts hall built in the whole state of Florida. We were on the cutting edge at that time. In today's reality, we have a lot more competition. The Broadway shows, the productions are much higher tech, big equipment. We're going to have Lion King here next year for a couple of weeks, a week or two. It's a rare event for us to be able to do that. Well, they almost have to rebuild the inside of the Van Wezel to even fit the Lion King in. And the markets are such that we have so much competition now that we have to be in a position to compete. And we've grown quite a bit. When you look at the population of Sarasota and Manatee counties right now, which the Van Wezel serves, we're almost at 800,000 people. This is kind of a major cultural attraction and center to bring in such a wide variety of entertainment. So I think pretty much people have listened to the experts in town that say we need a more modern, larger facility. And by the way, we also have conflicts in the facility with the incredible orchestra that's now become world-class here. And it makes it difficult for both of them. So they want to build an acoustically superior facility so they can continue to attract and retain top quality talent. And that's what this process is all about. And I think we'll work our way through this decision. No final decisions have been made, but I believe that, you know, the brain power in this community, the resources that we have, we're going to figure out a way to work through this and get something incredibly impressive that people are going to love, just like they love the Van Wezel now for the next 50 years. I'm very confident of that.
Okay, and just very quickly, the Centennial Park and the boat ramps are now in the planning area because, Tom?
Because the city let us. I mean, it's such an important piece of public space immediately adjacent to the original property. And so I think there was just a sense that there was a lot more connectivity and programmatic potential by incorporating that. And so
And there's a change in governance, right, too, Tom?
Well, yeah, people
Which I
probably
wasn't
don't
aware
realize this, but Sarasota County has been running the boat ramp for the city. They've fallen on difficult and challenging financial times, and they are transferring back to us most of the bigger parks that they've managed on behalf of the city, and we'll take over the operation of that park and the boat ramp in October, which is probably a good thing. We're a little bit closer to the waterfront. We have employees here all the time, and we're going to take advantage of what we learned in this process to really improve that facility for the short term as we try to evolve to the longer term. But we know it's a very popular boat ramp. People love it. There's 6 boat slips in there, and it's often jam-packed on weekends.
Okay, good, thanks. So before we get to, I guess the elephant in the room, so to speak, on what maybe is not in the concepts, what are some of the buildings or facilities or whatever that remain in the 3 concepts? Because I think that's universal, right?
That's right. So there is a series of facilities on the site that are designated, historically designated facilities. So that's the Municipal Auditorium, the Art Center, the History Center, and the Sarasota Garden Club, all of which are preserved in all of the schemes. In fact, in some of them, there's some modest expansions of some of those facilities proposed. And so we have 7 facilities and 5 remain in all 3 concepts.
And what are those, off the top of your head?
Oh, I just did the Municipal Auditorium.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. The History Center, the Sarasota Art Center, and the Garden Club.
Okay, great.
A lot of history there. The library was once located there. The Chamber of Commerce
Right.
was once located at the Blue Pagoda, where AG's
Blue
office
Pagoda.
is now, the Blue Pagoda.
And the Blue Pagoda.
All right, so this question is from Julie Byrne, and it reflects, what I've been hearing in the letters to the editor column and on the streets. Why are you considering tearing down the most iconic building in Sarasota?
We're not. Yeah.
So go ahead and address that.
I think the answer is we're not.
Yeah, lean forward.
Okay, we're not, and frankly, it's not our decision. I tried to explain earlier that with the conceptual designs and plans going forward, we're sorry? Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
that's better.
All right, I have to get right on top of this one. As I tried to explain earlier, with the concept designs that are out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we're reflecting the planning intent of both the orchestra and the Performing Arts Center. As I also tried to explain, I think you have to and we have to separate choices and decisions and sequence them. So the first decision, which Tom asked Tom, is, has a decision been made on a new Performing Arts Center? And Tom's long answer was, not yet. Okay, but that decision has to be made first, right? Then Mary and the team, let's say the decision is made to go forward. Then that triggers a transition decision for the current Van Wezel. Then that triggers the question of what do you do with the current building. But nobody has said tear it down. Nobody has even talked about tear it down. And I guess the last thing I would say is, from my personal experience in similar effort like this for a decade or more in Cincinnati, you're always going to have these kinds of questions come up, and there are very sensible processes that you can go through to, as a community, as a city or county, whomever the entity is, make a decision. And you have done this in Sarasota. Sarasota Memorial High School, I believe, was empty in 2003. I believe one of the local foundations put some seed money up and started a process to look at, is there a viable business plan that's economically sustainable for this historic building? They went through, evaluation of alternatives. There was one that was preferred, and they had to go back and figure out, could they handle the capital side of it and the operating side of it, the financial side of it. And I think we're going to open a new art museum and education center there next year. So that's just one example. But the only point I'm trying to make is, first things first, the city will make a decision on whether we go forward with a performing arts center, and then if they do.
And let me just add, and maybe we're thinking a little bit too much about it, and I don't want to start a food fight here, but we're looking at climate change, and we're looking forward for 50 years here. The fact is, Sarasota Bay and the Gulf of Mexico have risen 7 inches since 1945 as measured by local gauges. We fully expect that the Sarasota Bay and Gulf of Mexico is going to rise by 12 to 18 inches by 2050. That's a mid-course estimate. It could go up, it could go down, depending what we as citizens do to control carbon in the atmosphere. But the orchestra pit at the Van Wezel is already below sea level. These are all just facts that I'm telling you. I'm not saying it's driving the process, but it is a background reality that I think we're trying to think ahead about.
So does that affect, one of the questions that's come up, why was not a repurposing, a renovation, downsizing, upsizing of the Van Wezel considered in these concepts? So if you could just address that real quickly, please.
We're only at the first intermission. We're
Well,
the third inning of a 9-inning game. Maybe that's a better
yeah.
analogy.
Yeah.
All right, so Tom, in terms of what you know, what are there limits on renovating the Van Wezel, financial or otherwise?
There are. That's another good technical point related to the last point I made. We're in the FEMA flood zone, and there we can only spend, according to FEMA, half of the value of the Van Wezel on any renovation. So there is a cap and a limit to what we can spend. Now, if this is the decision to make a big, massive renovation there, then, there may be a way around the rules or something. Tom, maybe you know somebody in D.C. But there are real rules on that. So, that's a part of the analysis that's underway right now.
Okay, so here's a fun question. From Joyce Fitzpatrick: clean energy and solar and wind are rapidly becoming our future. Are there any plans for incorporating clean energy into the concepts?
Well, that's a great point. So we have shown some sort of on our options. Too far away? Okay. We've shown some ideas and strategies such as solar panels. We've shown some shading devices. We had a long conversation with the city today that we're saying there could be a way to think about an electric generation plant on site that could fuel these new facilities. And so there's been discussion about geothermal very early in the process, but environmental sustainability is very front of mind. And so we are excited to explore those opportunities with you.
Okay.
And this will be an assignment to the architects, because once these preliminary decisions are made and this concept and the plan is approved, the Van Wezel will then have to hire its own architect, and the orchestra hall would hire its own architect. And I believe both of those organizations would really stress that, because that is a part of this community's identity as well, being in touch with nature and enjoying this place we call paradise. And if we want to preserve it, we better start thinking a lot about that aspect of our future.
Okay. This is from Justin Norwood, Facebook Live. And it's a question I had as a Florida native. How did these underground roads and parking garages work with Florida's water table, high water table?
Yeah, so that's our engineers. I'm looking at my good friend Zach Crisco, who has led this effort with our friends from Baird. It looked at projections for sea level rise. Sea level rise in and of itself doesn't inundate our site. It just raises an already high level, but it doesn't flood our site. It's really coastal and storm surges that cause us challenges at the lower levels. So that was taken into consideration, as was the groundwater table. And we have established, and it's all online on the boards, that we have much more depth of experience and to show you about this. We've made a list of recommendations, or a graph of recommendations, about different types of infrastructure, parks, parking, facilities and buildings, and what that first floor, finished floor, needs to be at to both comply with FEMA regulations, but also to put us in a good position for that coastal storm surge. So things like the parking that we're showing, sometimes suppressed, still is, we feel really comfortable that at elevation 6, it will occasionally flood, but parking is one of those things that can take an occasional storm surge flood and be pretty resilient. So we know we can design that. Whereas buildings that can't be flooded are really up at more like that elevation between 15 and elevation 18. And so we're trying to systematically go through and understand the projections and the risk, and then set a series of recommendations about how we establish critical infrastructure. There's been a lot of conversation about the proposal of a tunnel on 41 and a lot of concerns about flooding, and Zach could speak to this much more eloquently than I can. I was kind of geeking out listening to him talk about buoyancy and the volume of groundwater and how you think about it. But we believe it's technically feasible to think about some form of a small underpass for 41, if that's the direction the community would like to go. It's a capital investment, it's significant, but we thought we owed you a significant strategy that matches the amount of concern about crossing 41. And so we feel like with good engineering, sound engineering, and good waterproofing and good backup resilient pumping systems, that it's entirely possible and plausible. Again, it's all a matter of where we want to prioritize our investments in this site, and connectivity seemed to us one of those ones that we could put out some really strong, big ideas.
Okay.
And we've heard they've done this in the Fort Lauderdale area and the other side of the state, so I'm looking forward to going over and touring those similar projects.
Okay. Can you explain, this is from Glenn Shipley, can you explain the access points across 41 in each scenario, and which one has the best access through 41?
So again, we don't have a fixed idea about what the best way to cross 41 is. We present you with 3 different ideas. As described, the first option really centralizes in one grand, I think it's 200-foot wide land bridge that crosses 41, enabling the road to go beneath. And so we're really saying one great seamless pedestrian connection that basically grows the park in the direction of the Rosemary community. That's not to say that at the roundabouts, and there are 2 planned, one under construction at 10th and one planned by FDOT in the future at Boulevard of the Arts. And so that's not to say those won't also be pedestrian crossings, because they will be, but the major crossing might be at that central location in the first scheme. In the second scheme, we looked at 3 different overpasses, one here on the north end of the site, connecting Pioneer Park and Centennial Park, one at the central location at 10th, and then one to the south at Boulevard of the Arts, the 3 basic kind of gateways into the property. And so the question to you is, is it one big seamless gesture that's monumental? Is it a series of smaller interventions? And then in the last scheme, we wanted to try one proposal where we thought about things like pedestrian medians and refuges, more planting on 41, better crossings, more kind of tactical, what we call traffic calming strategies. But nobody's like that. Everyone has seemed to tell us in one way or another that some form of a structural solution might be the right thing here, given the volume of traffic, and so we're already hearing it.
Okay, good.
Tom, we'll be testing some pedestrian push-button crosswalks at US 41 on Ritz-Carlton Drive, hopefully within the next 45 days. FDOT is installing them, and we'll be looking forward to feedback on that.
Are you asking for volunteers?
Yes.
Okay, so here's kind of, here are 3 that are somewhat along the same theme. Centennial Park was designed to serve the boating public. What would be the impact on the boating overall? And what provisions would you make for boaters to come to events and restaurants? And how would you enhance the experience for boaters? So that's a trio on the same topic.
So I'm just going to be quoting Mike Herman from Moffett and Nickel, our experts, because they did a deep dive into the existing boat ramp, as we already covered. And so what we have planned for in each of the three schemes, and to varying degrees depending on the design idea, are basically three major ideas about boating. First, there's the boat ramp. In one scheme, we enhance it and make it even better than it is today, and it's already a really high-functioning boat ramp. In the other two schemes, we move it to move it away from sort of more delicate uses and hopefully enhance it as well. The second idea is really piers. Piers are extraordinary ways to welcome boaters to come to tie up, to have historic boats come, to have all kinds of different show boats come. And so in each of the schemes, we have some idea about pier landscapes that can really embrace even water taxis. And the last is the notion of human-powered craft. And so we talked about all of these ways we can invite people to pull a kayak in and out of the water. In one scheme, we have an actual physical kayak launch. In some cases, we have beaches that can really enable that kind of use. And so we're exploring that. We think that that is one of the most critical and beautiful parts of waterfront parks, is the ability to engage with the water through that experience. And so looking in each scheme to really enhance and grow those opportunities on site.
Yeah, if I may add just
Sure.
one thing too, we need to keep this communication and dialogue going because, our objective is a world-class boating venue, and that means what are all the amenities that might be needed? So service amenities, convenience amenities, what food and beverage? I mean, we could sit up in a helicopter and watch where the boats pull in, which keys where, and they're pulling in where there's good food and where you can get a drink, a libation of your choice. Tom's apparently is wine. But no, we really need to think that through, right? And we have the capability to do that with the boating community. And by the way, the non-powered boating community in addition, okay? And we want to do something as special there as we're trying to do for the green space, the parkland, the recreation, and the cultural park.
Tom?
And the boat ramp, maybe you've covered this already, but it's a bit of an economic generator. The surveys that were just completed over 3 weeks have indicated that almost 70% of the boating is commercially related for fishing charters and catching fish to sell. So there's a business element in what's happening there, a job element as well, besides just family, leisure, and fun.
That's great.
Okay, Gina, I'd be derelict in my duties if I didn't say, now you just said we'd move it. So I think probably for everybody's benefit, especially yours, you might want to say where you're thinking about moving it.
Sorry, I assume everyone is reading the plan in the same way that I am. Here's the existing boat ramp. You see these 4 fingers that are basically the lanes or ramps into the water. And so in 2 of the 3 schemes, we suggested moving it actually physically to the north. In the case of the central scheme, the idea was if this is really an active canal district of restaurants and dining, it might not be the best complementary use there, and that we could instead move it here, still have all that functionality, but not have that conflict. In this scheme, in the island scheme, we were thinking if we introduced this new water trail through the site that's mostly for human-powered craft, that again, we wouldn't want there to be conflicts between power boats and human-powered craft. So again, moving the boating facility to the north again so that we could keep those without having conflict.
And Tom, just a sidebar to that, some who have been around a long time probably remember this, but the FPL used to have a little power plant just north of the boat ramp. I'm told it actually used to produce power for Longboat Key. I'm not sure if that's correct. But the city, way back when, negotiated an easement, and we have some rights to the waterfront there. They do have a station, a transformer station there, but we have an outstanding relationship with FPL, and it's been suggested that they be brought into this collaboration to see if we can work out some kind of arrangement to have some extra space up there to free up the bayfront for the many great ideas that are evolving.
Okay. Will access to the site be free of charge? Just another back
Can we
question.
just say yes?
Are you off the boat ramp? Are we still on the boat ramp?
No,
No,
or just
the
in
site.
general. On the
Site.
Another boat ramp thing, 75% of the users do not live in the city. So
But the
there may be
43
some slight charges at some point for keeping the boat ramp area up when the county gives it back to us.
That's
Yeah,
site.
but-
That's an awfully broad question. I guess I would say for most I think the expectation is for most passive uses, of course, it's going to be free of charge, right? You can have your glass of wine there, people can watch sunset there, we can walk there, we can bicycle there, we can do all of that. Having said that, I mean, obviously, if you go to the orchestra today or the Van Wezel, it isn't free of charge, right? So they will continue to make decisions about their programming. And it's wide open because we should have mentioned earlier, Tom, that in addition to the design and the master plan, we owe the city and the community a recommendation on financial strategy and financial plan. And we owe a recommendation on governance. And one of the sources in financial planning is what's called earned revenue or earned income from sites like these. And that's a whole wide range of things. Okay, so we're not even in the third inning on that one. We're in the top of the first, so looking at what's possible.
But the strategy or the deliverables for the organization is to deliver a proposed financing program.
Strategy and plan.
Strategy.
And one of the fundamental principles of the whole plan is open, free to the public.
Yeah.
And someplace everyone would want to be, from young children to the elderly and everybody in between.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, if I wasn't clear about that, I mean, obviously, all the park and public space and green space is free, right? Free and open, and access to the bay, free and open, okay? What I was trying to say is, if we add food and beverage, it's not uncommon to ask food and beverage participants to help out.
That's right.
Okay, I can't say that someone won't come up with an event that they want to do that won't charge us for at least the food and beverage side, and maybe even for the ticketed side. We just don't know. Okay, we need to think our way through all of that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have said that all three of the plans will feature some form of an open-air amphitheater.
That's
and
right.
maybe more outdoor programming at the appropriate time of the season. So far, those have all been free that we've had here in town.
Yeah, that was one of our questions, was would the Sound of Music, it was nice alliteration there, would the Sound of Music be open to the public in some fashion, perhaps outside with broadcasts of events or that kind of thing? So are there anything like that in any of the concepts?
Yeah, I would say that we're really excited about that. That seems to be the way that most performing arts sites like this are moving, that they're trying to break down the fifth wall, I guess, and really invite people in. And I would also say it seems really consistent with what we've heard from the site incumbents, as AG calls them, that both the Van Wezel and the orchestra would really like to have broader engagement and more inclusive engagement with the community. And so I'm sure that's part of the future of the site.
Okay, so just for clarity, so when the planning organization comes up with its strategies, who will make decisions on whether to pursue those strategies? Tom?
Well, as I understand it, the SBPO's mission is to present the City Commission and the community with a master plan for the future of the Bay site. And that is scheduled, AG, to occur September
6th, I believe.
6th. We
Is that
even have
right?
a date. It seems awfully ambitious, but the private sector seems to be able to get its goals met. So we'll see.
But they want to be done. They want to be done.
Yeah, they want to be done. The theme is
No, actually.
get to
Actually,
yes.
we want to begin. We want to begin because, what really I think will happen is if we get a go-ahead, what we'll get a go-ahead for is sort of phase one, and, let's move to the next steps. But there'll be concrete proposals.
Yeah, the City Commission will hopefully be able to approve the plan and then begin to implement it, and that is also one of the principles. We had a plan done here in 2007, and that plan has sat on the shelf since 2007. Admittedly, we were interrupted by the Great Recession, but this plan blows the doors off of anything that was in that plan. So maybe we lucked out right there. But this group is working to do something that will actually get done, and the board is actively pursuing that element. What are we going to do first, second, third? And we want, they want to begin as early as October, but we've got to get some financing in place first.
Yeah. But I guess the bottom line, just for clarity, is that the City Commission would have to make public decisions on taxation, blah, 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 blah. They would have to make those decisions. in a very open, public way.
Well, when there are any tax revenues involved, yeah, they would be involved. I'm hoping there's some philanthropy associated with this before it's all said and done. There has been so far a significant amount. Thank goodness we're in a community like that. And I think that's what like this, and I think that's why we're able to be so ambitious in our visions for the future, because we have folks who are willing to step up to pay for the quality amenities that have enriched their lives here, and hopefully that will continue. We've had a lot of involvement with the area foundations to date. They've brought a lot of ideas as well as resources to the table, and we have folks, we're blessed to have people who live here who have traveled the whole world, and they've brought back ideas and best practices and examples of things they've loved in other places. And some of those things are working their way in, and some of them, they're not all huge ideas like the Sydney Orchestra Hall. They're a bunch of small little things that just make for a nice place. And so we're benefiting greatly by this kind of feedback loop that's been created.
All right. And this may be Gina. Explain the Van Wezel trace concept.
So there was early in the process, we were having a design workshop here, and we were thinking about how can we start to think about how do you honor the architectural presence of the Van Wezel facility if and when it's decided, if and when it's decided that it no longer will live in its current skin and its current form. And one of the ideas from Christine, it was part of a brainstorming session, was what if we reinterpret the Van Wezel architecture as an outdoor facility and really think about it as an outdoor performance space that is flood resilient and flood friendly, but still has the qualities of the architecture of the current one. And so it was to us a really poetic way of taking something that is treasured and adapting it and interpreting it for the 21st century in a way that holds on to heritage, still allows it to be a community cultural performance center, but really allows that to be something that's more flood resilient. As we know, it will see more events in the future.
Okay. Any coordination with what we all still refer to as the Quay property?
Yes, we meet frequently with that team and have really come to understand a lot of their development pattern, their public space, their street grid. We've been coordinating on the plans, so we show their current plans within our efforts and have been looking for ways of strengthening connectivity, particularly along Boulevard of the Arts, which is our major spine.
They were both, both leaders of the Quay project joined us today, so I was really encouraged to see that. But we're in regular contact.
All right.
Bill and Sasaki and the whole team.
There will be a pretty beefy multi-use trail that runs through the Quay property along the canal right up to the doorstep of the bayfront.
You know, Tom, we're also in regular contact with the Rosemary District, where there's obviously a whole heck of a lot going on. And, you know, as we move through additional phases, we've been in close contact with CCNA in the neighborhoods. You know, we've continued to stay close to the Bayfront 2020 Coalition. So, yeah, I mean, the more we're in touch and the more we coordinate and the more we understand what each is trying to do, you know, the better the end result will be.
Okay. I'm going to summarize another trio here. If you shrink 41 or put in a narrow lane or et cetera, have an overpass, isn't that going to contribute to additional gridlock?
We aren't making any proposals as part of this effort to in any way minimize the lane widths or the road dimensions that exist today on 41. And so we are striving not to enhance what we understand from the community to be significant traffic issues and perception of significant traffic issues. And so, no, we would hope that these interventions would not slow down traffic.
Maybe I hope, I'm not repeating this, but today we had a discussion about the implications of autonomous driving vehicles, the driverless cars, and what is that going to mean to the site and the design of the buildings and their parking requirements. Right. And we have people who attend national conferences and bring back information to us. And they're saying we're going to start to see this integrated in our community within the next 5 years. Now, it's not going to be massive yet, but this is influencing the various designs and calculations that, you know, most people are now beginning to believe this is going to become a reality for us 20 years down the road. So there needs to be ample drop-off and pickup spaces.
right,
or
and-
rows or lanes.
And also, we've discussed the potential, one thing is that we know we have this incredible peak demand for the site, and so how do we accommodate that, but not build to peak demand? That's a very last century idea about how to address parking. And so we're trying to find that sweet spot where we offer enough convenient, proximate parking, but also rely on lots of other kinds of multimodal strategies. One of the things that we're really excited about, we were talking about also with the city today, was, what's the garage of the future? The parking garage that enables easy conversion in the future in the case we aren't driving in single occupancy vehicles anymore in 20 years from now. So we're not building structured parking that can only be structured parking. So I think that's a real potential innovation on this site and something that we can consider.
We know how we already deal with peak traffic is half the people leave the Van Wezel early. It's true.
Crawling over each other because there's no center aisle.
What's the estimate on completing the project? It says the project. So,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of projects. But what timeline are we working on now and in the immediate future?
We have not yet begun to look carefully at phasing. We've started to identify challenges to phasing and thinking about how we might start thinking about phasing. It's a very complicated question because, as you've heard many times today, we aren't ultimate decision makers for some of the facilities, and so we need to keep working hand in hand with those site incumbents and their master planning processes. I can tell you that having worked on a number of waterfront projects across the country of this kind of complexity, we can imagine full realization of this site is anywhere from 10 to 20 years, 10 on the ambitious side, 20 in the long term, but that we really must have some demonstrated advancement of the vision in the short term. So we're really going to be thinking about what is that phase one. What are the first kinds of things we can do that can really start to bring people to this site in new ways and keep momentum up so that we can move towards the vision. And so we imagine this could be a multi-phased process over a number of years, but it's our intention to try to get something realized as soon as humanly possible.
And the trick will be keeping the Van Wezel and the orchestra performing throughout any transition
That's
period.
right.
We do not want to lose the good loyalty, the good relationships that have been built up and earned over the last 50 years. And we want to build up excitement in the future. So that's going to be the big trick to implementing
be
the different
complicated.
phases of this.
Okay. So I'll read this one directly. To what extent does this project depend on private investment by commercial developers?
0 so far. And, we just don't know. But I think there'll be private money. I don't think it'll be a lot of private developer money, okay? And the reason I say that is because the principal structures, the principal structure, if it ends up being decided to go in this site, would be either an orchestra hall or a performing arts center. And, the trend in that world is more and more private philanthropy, right? So, but it's private philanthropy, not private developers. Obviously, who is a developer? Is a restaurant owner a developer? They're going to have to put their capital in if they want to put a restaurant on the site, or if we're going to take care of your wine, somebody puts up a bar, that's going to have to be their nickel. But no, I think the private money we're thinking about in the overall scheme of financial strategy is more, what are foundation sources? What are philanthropic sources? Which foundations have a high interest in environmental sustainability projects, in cultural projects, in boating and recreation, and the kinds of things that we're trying to do. So we'll try to match, intended uses with interested private parties. And then there'll be, of course, public money from a whole bunch of sources.
And there are some serious site limitations or restrictions. There can only be 2 buildings, 90 feet high, that's the total height. And the Van Wezel is already there at 90, and that's one of them. So there's not going to be residential condo towers there. And I think the vision is, with the development that's underway on the Quay, with what we're seeing on 41, this is really going to be a green oasis and a great resource for the neighborhood, the entire city, and performance nights, the whole region.
Yeah.
Hey.
And along that line, I was going to say, whether it's fair or not, there's a certain amount of angst in the community about overdevelopment, quote unquote, and so everybody can decide how to define that themselves. But did you take that into consideration in designing these concepts? And
Absolutely.
if so, how, please?
When we came here in December, we got cared at very loudly from the community about not wanting a lot of development on the site. And so we asked very explicitly in our February meetings, what kinds of amenities do you want to see here? Food and beverage rose to the top of every survey. I know, it's funny, that's everywhere. It's not just you all that like to eat. So that is what we're showing as the only non-cultural uses on site, except potentially some support retail that could be associated with the boat ramp. And so we heard the cry loud and clear for there to be public access, continuous public access, maximize green space, and that's really driven a lot of our decisions, things like moving to structured parking instead of surface parking so we can still keep those uses on site, but maximize green space. We haven't introduced any, as you said, no other kinds of development, and we do have pretty significant restrictions on height limitations. 2 cultural facilities at 90 feet are allowed, and only up to 45 feet high for any other facilities like the parking decks, that's 4 stories. So we are both regulatory bound, and we're also bound by the commitment to the community to really listen and try to implement your vision for this important site.
Community's been loud and clear, and at the meetings we had with the commissioners, they were loud and clear. No residences, no residential towers, no hotels, no convention center, no big box retail. You know, and by the way, you know, we all think that's the right decision. So, you know, that helps.
This is already the city's busiest, most visited park, believe it or not, and it really is, the future is shaping up that this will truly be elevated to be truly the city's central park, and what a perfect location to have a central park.
Okay, so what would be so far, have you been able to say what the planned height of the tallest structure might be? Are we that far yet?
Then probably the 90 feet.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Millie Small.
And that begins at the 17-foot building
The base flood
requirement. You have to be
elevation, that's
17 feet above now sea level, or above
It's the base flood elevation, which
zero
is
elevation, the base elevation, so.
Okay, just so everybody knows, we will have you out of here by 7, so, and we're getting close. After all this was done, at what point will you start to talk about maintenance costs, those kinds of things?
We already are. So as we said, we have incredible resources in HRNA and Kathy Blaha, and these are folks that really help think about long-term sustainability, and that's not just environmental, that's financial. And so we've begun modeling in each of these 3 options. What are the kind of high maintenance landscapes? Where are the low maintenance landscapes? What are those proportions? Those are shown as part of the evaluation criteria for each scheme. We've started looking at potential revenue generation in the park through these food and beverage offerings. We've started looking at value surrounding the park and how we might capture some of that. And we've been thinking about how to plan for maintenance and operations to keep this a world-class park over time, that it's not enough just to build something, you also have to steward it and make sure you can steward it well into the future. And so that's been part of our charge. It's the part of the charge that the SBPO has committed to for the city as well. And again, we're held by a covenant to all of you that that's been high on your priorities, that we have a long-term strategy for that. So it's already on the paper.
Okay, good. Did we miss anything that you want to
I don't know. Did
mention
we
real
miss
quickly
anything?
in the last minute?
I think just thank everybody for being here and continuing to participate. Stay tuned. If you have ideas, get them to us. The office for this initiative is the Blue Pagoda right across the street. And it's the one with the blue roof, and Bill's there every day, and Sue, and AG from time to time.
And I would only say we, I don't know, what was it, 11:30 team? We opened the doors of the Van Wezel Grand Foyer today and could not believe the swarm of human beings that came to engage in this process. We had 300 people in an hour. It was packed. So I just want you all to know that we're doing our best to really listen and to engage every person we can in this community. So please invite your friends to participate in the online survey. It's thebaysarasota.org. And I would also, just because we would be remiss in not acknowledging at large, our communications team members who have been doing the Facebook Live and have been a really extraordinary part of the team in terms of getting the word out about this process. So thank you all for coming.
So at thebaysarasota.org
yep.
is
all of the materials from the public meetings and the survey, just as was given to the public.
Okay.
Yep.
And how do you find those materials? Are they going to be on the homepage pretty soon?
There's a big pink banner. So.
Okay. And so the survey is there?
Yes, there's an online survey that basically replicates the paper survey.
And you're going to post the answers to the questions there. And if people just want to gripe or say, why are you doing this or don't do that, they can send them in how?
They can already do that on thebay.org.
Okay.
And some, thankfully, have been doing it because, thebay.org, right?
Thebaysarasota.org.
Thebaysarasota.org. Yes, and we've already been, first of all, thank you for, those who have been conversing with us all along. I mean, frankly, I shout out to the boating community. We learned a lot more, and that triggered our survey, and we've learned even more. So, the more we learn, the better the team can design and plan.
All right. So thank you, Gina, Tom,
Thank you.
AG. Just real quick, thank you to the Sarasota Orchestra. And one last thing, please give a round of applause for Manatee Educational TV, Charles Clapsaddle and his team. They did the sound, the video. So thanks again, everybody.
I don't think so.